Hey guys! So today we are going to talk about email development, so let's get into it. You see, this morning I was looking through my comments, and you may ask, like, why are you going to talk about emails again? Because the thing is, guys, I had this comment from someone who had watched one of my previous video. She stated a few things, we had a little bit of a discussion, and she pointed out something, a few things, but one of the things that kind of stood out with her comment was that I was kind of focusing more on making a distinction between a software developer and an email developer in that video, when the core question I was trying to answer was really, all right, what does it actually take? Like, what's required of you? And I kind of had to go back because it was such a long time ago. So I went back and I had a look, and she was absolutely right, completely right. So here we are. This time I'll try to see if I can do this right and not get derailed into the semantics of all these other things. So, email development, guys. The basic requirements for an email, like an HTML email, I hope that that's clear what we're talking about here. So there are you may not think this, but there are actually companies who will pay you to develop email templates. There are companies who sell email templates, and there are companies who have just the need for somebody to do it. So there's a few options there. I will tell you that it's not as common. I mean, you may have to look a little bit in order to kind of to get this sort of job. So just a warning, not saying that you shouldn't try it. It's just an observation that most of software development is not that niched, because it is a little bit of a niched market. Anywho, in order for you to develop emails, you should know a few things. The basics are it's just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Now, when you work as an email developer in general, or rather when you are developing email templates, if you will, you should know that there are no real standards for this sort of work. So although the amount of code that you write is fairly niched towards like completely pure front-end related things, the time you have to invest, and then of course there's quite a lot of testing involved as well, because you have to validate that, you know, that the email is going to look the same in the various different clients. Because email development, guys, it's actually very tricky. Not because necessarily that the code itself is all that complicated, but rather because, as I said, there's so many inconsistencies. So you have frameworks like, my personal favorite one is Ink, where it's basically a project that allows you to create a CSS structure with just, basically it allows you to create a CSS structure with just HTML and table layouts in order to align things. You can have a look at that project. It's fairly good actually, and it helped me quite a bit when I had to do when I did this sort of development right. So apart from that, when it comes to email development, is that it's a very low how do I put this? The requirements for that sort of work is fairly low in comparison to more advanced forms of programming. As I said, like, the tricky part about it is that there's quite a lot of overhead testing involved in it, but you can actually take a boot camp. If you take I would say 3 to 6 months boot camp on JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, you are fairly equipped. And you have to, I would recommend you to do some studying in your own time as well, to just get familiar with some of the tools, because I mean, my personal favorite, Ink, is not the only tool out there. There's plenty of other tools, and I actually saw a few projects that I've seen that are fairly promising, that might even be better, but it's a little bit early to say. So a little bit of self-studies on top of that bootcamp, and then you should be fairly equipped to do this sort of work. And I mean, it pays just as any other, like most jobs in IT pay fairly well. So if you can find this sort of job, it might be a very good fit for you. I will raise a warning finger, and I'll try not to derail us here, but this is the thing I was trying to warn you about in the last video, and this is something I think I need to clarify. Guys, becoming an email developer does not necessarily set you on the path to becoming a more generic sort of programmer, because even your CSS, even the CSS that you write for emails are it's so specialized in order to cater to all these deviations in the standards that it almost doesn't even reflect what regular CSS looks like. As an example, same thing with HTML, where you will have to write some really quirky, weird HTML to get it to work, and that's simply not how a regular website would work. Same thing with JavaScript and so forth. There are, like, it's a very, as I said, a very specialized field, if you will, or job to have. And if that is, if you're okay with that, if you want to go into IT and you really like this sort of work, then this is perfect. But if you're looking to get this job first and then you want to transition into more serious software development, I'm not saying it's not feasible, but there might be better paths to getting there, because unfortunately this sort of development that you will do, as I said, is not going to necessarily train you in relevant skills that can then be transferred over to other forms of development, where you do, say, front-end development or back-end development, or full stack development, call it whatever you want, like whatever your desire is. Because, as I said, it's extremely niche. You can, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's a very similar type of situation where games development is also very specialized. That there's more transfer of knowledge and like value for a person who does games development to go into standard web development, if you will, than it is for an email developer. So I'm just, as I said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be an email developer. I'm just stating that if the idea for you is to become a real software developer who writes software for more advanced applications, this may not get you there. It's just setting your expectations. Okay, so to summarize, the basics of being an email developer is, first and foremost, you have to find the job, because it's not the most common thing, but there are jobs out there and they pay fairly well. Second thing is you need CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, and you don't need to be an expert in these things. It would be sufficient for you to spend some time on a bootcamp, 3 to 6 months, something of that nature, to learn these things, and then a little bit of self-study in order to learn to actually get familiar with this sort of work, because it's not as straightforward as you might expect. And then prepare yourself for doing a bit of development and then doing quite a lot of validation in different email clients in order to make sure that everything looks the way it should look. And finally, if your goal is to become a software developer, this may or may not be a good path for you. It might work out, it may not, but as I said, you shouldn't be aware of that it's highly specialized work. Have a great day.